Well, welcome everybody to the Hawkesbury Local Planning Panel meeting for the 17th of March today. My name's Louise Byrne. I'm the chair of this meeting, and I believe that we are now being live streamed. So if anyone has a view to the opposite, can they please let me know? We've just had a few little IT glitches this morning. Now, the panel's been appointed by the Minister for Planning and the Council to determine certain categories of development applications, three of which we have before us today. The other panel members are John Brunton, who's the town planner. He's an expert member. Ian Stapleton, architect, who is also an expert member. And Paul Rogers, who is a community member.
Morning.
Now, before I go any further, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Darug people, their elders past and present. A couple of formal matters about conduct in the meeting. And as a courtesy to others, please keep your microphones on mute at all times unless I call on you to speak. The terms of Privacy and Personal Information Protection Act protect personal information provided at, I'll start that again. In the terms of the Privacy and Personal Information Protection Act, personal information provided at the meeting will be recorded. Now, the provision of any information that is recorded is voluntary on your behalf. Any person who does not wish to be recorded should not address the panel. It's important that all the speakers understand this. Now, for the benefit of persons who will be addressing the panel, it's expected that you will refrain from making insult, allegation, or personal comment against any person, present or not at this meeting. This request relates to both your address to the meeting and any answers given in response to questions from the panel. Now, under the panel's code of conduct, panel members are required to disclose any pecuniary and or non-pecuniary interest in relation to the matters on today's agenda, and each panelist has completed disclosure forms. I personally declare I have no conflicts of interest in relation to today's agenda and have signed a form to that effect, and I just ask each of the panel members whether they have any conflicts of interest to declare. John Brunton?
I don't have any conflicts of interest to declare. I should be noted, however, that I won't be participating in item 2, which is the property in Cueva Circuit, North Richmond, as I was a member of the original panel. And so as this is a review of that decision, I won't be participating.
Thank you, John. And that's accepted. We'll still have 3 panel members who can decide on that item about the childcare centre, correct?
Yes.
Ian Stapleton?
I've got no conflict on any of the items.
Thank you. Paul Rogers?
No conflicts of interest on any item before the panel today.
Now, the panel has, some members of the panel will have done site visits of these matters that are before the panel today. I haven't been to any of them on this occasion because of the flooding through my plans into Arai, but some of the members have been and looked at the sites. And in my case, where I haven't had a chance to look, I am aware of those localities. I've visited and have knowledge of Wilberforce and Barrambing and North Richmond, and I've looked at Google Maps and other resources that are provided with the applications. So we've also read assessment reports by the council officers and, of course, the material that's on the agenda for each item before the panel today. So that's just an assurance to persons who are present today that the panel members are fully aware and of the issues that are involved in these three matters. Now we're going to start going through the agenda very soon. But I'll just remind you a couple of things. Only those persons who have registered to speak will be permitted to address the panel. And the making of submissions is limited to 3 minutes to speak. You then may be asked questions by the panel members, and that's a different matter. But in the initial speaking, we ask you to limit it to 3 minutes. And I note that a couple of people have been registered already to speak. Okay, so there's one other formal matter that I have to deal with, and that is the item 1, the pecuniary interest returns. Just by way of explanation, when members are appointed to this panel and selected by council, so the chair is appointed by the minister, chair is appointed by the minister, and the other members are appointed by council. There's a list of some 20 or maybe 15 names. They have to fill out a pecuniary, we all have to fill out a pecuniary interest return. There's been a technical glitch in those forms that's only just been revealed by council, in that the timing to comply with the act of lodging a pecuniary return was wrongly, pardon me, wrongly named on the, wrongly stated on the forms. In terms of substance of the disclosures, nothing will change, and each of the members, and this is more relevant obviously right now for this meeting, for the 4 people, that includes myself, who are conducting the panel, who are part of the panel today. So the error is going to be corrected by renewed forms that properly state the exact date, but at least for today, the 4 panel members have made the correct disclosures, and just the form of those disclosures is going to be corrected after the meeting today. And so I nominally table those disclosures today prior to us determining these matters and hearing this matter, just so that there is no difficulty with the disclosures that the 4 panel members today have. Does that, it's a technical matter. There's no need for any further discussion of it. The other panel members happy with the way I have addressed that?
Yes, I'm happy with that arrangement. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll now go to...
Louise, sorry to interrupt you, but you'll actually just need someone to first and second the recommendation for the pecuniary interest. Is that possible?
Yes, I'm sorry about that. So
I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second it.
thank you very much, Jody, pulling me up on meeting procedure. Thank you. What I didn't say, of course, to members of the public is that what will happen is that we will hear from you, and then the panel will adjourn into a closed session to deliberate. This may take some time. Generally, then the panel decision will be either announced in public, or more likely it will be confirmed in the official minutes, which will be available on the council's website, most likely by next Thursday. Is that understood by everyone participating in this meeting today? I'm assuming yes. Okay, so we've actually now dealt with item 1, which were the pecuniary interest returns. Item 2 is the 6 Keita Circuit North Richmond matter. And we have a detailed, the DA number is S82A0001/21, and I note that it is a review of an earlier decision. we have a detailed report on that DA in the papers starting at page 5. Sorry, starting at page 7. Is there anything further the council officer who was involved in the assessment of this you want to say prior to me asking the speakers to start? And the council officer who was involved in, who prepared this report, are they present today?
Yes.
And you just state your name again, please.
My name's William Pillion. I'm a town planner employed at Hawkesbury Council.
Thanks, William. Is there anything further you wanted to add to this report today, right now in this meeting?
Since the reports have been prepared, the state government has made changes to a number of SEPs, which have been consolidated into a new series of SEPs. So the report may refer to previous state environmental planning policies that have been shifted and consolidated into a new grouping of names. It doesn't change the permissibilities or doesn't change the matters to be considered. There's just be different references, and that's in accordance with the state government's changes on the 1st of March.
Okay, thank you for that, William. All right, now I have, I'll call now on is Miss Isabel Cueva Fernandez present?
Yes.
You're invited now to speak on this development, the childcare centre. Do you understand what I'm referring to? Hello? Hello?
Take yourself off mute, Isabella.
Isabella, are you able to speak now?
Would like to. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear. It might be helpful if you state your name and your what the issues you have
Okay, so
in respect to the childcare centre. Now, can I just ask you another question? You've been appointed or asked or selected by a number of people who've objected to this development to speak on their behalf. Is that correct?
no.
No, it's not. Okay. So you're speaking just in respect of yourself. Is that right?
Yes, I spoke to neighbors, but they haven't said that I should speak for them, but they agree with me. But
Yes. And you've got the papers for the meeting today, do you?
yes, I do.
And you've read this report by the council officer?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you now have, you have 3 minutes approximately.
Yeah.
We haven't got a stopwatch running, I don't believe, but we've
Okay.
to state to the panel, this is your opportunity to state to the panel who's going to decide this matter, what your concerns are about the proposed development at 6 Keeda Circuit, North Richmond. Okay.
Okay. So, I mean, the traffic congestion has already been mentioned by all the neighbors. So the first objection was like 121 people objecting, but every time they is less people, but the congestion is known because there is a school, there is a higher density coming up, and now with the childcare center, 70 more cars will be involved in coming and going. At the times when a school come, people park, we can't just leave the area. It's just completely congested. The council came to look one day, and the study was done on one occasion, not on multiple occasions. Apart from that, the noise, you're saying that this is a medium density housing, but put 58 kids plus 20 staff plus all the cars in a residential area, which is a very quiet area full of retirees. it becomes like a birthday party non-stop. And this is a nightmare for us. When we bought the houses was on these premises, that it was a quiet residential area. Now that there is a need maybe for a childcare center, I agree with this, but this is not the right location because the traffic and there is no really a way around it. Maybe on the other side of North Richmond is a better, is less congestion. And another thing that I would like the council to consider is that if all the neighbors have opposed this, I think that the council needs to take in consideration the well-being of neighbors and maybe not the business plan of one particular person. That's what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you, Isabel. Has anyone got any of the panel members got any questions they'd like to ask Isabel?
Yes, Chair, I would, if I may.
That's granted, yes.
Yes, Isabel, it's Paul Rogers speaking. I'm the community rep on the panel. If you're comfortable, I'm actually looking at Google Maps at the moment, which provides a pictorial shot of the site. Are you able to indicate where do you live and or where your concerns particularly are? What number?
I'm at 18 Cueva Circuit, so it's almost behind the fence of the childcare center. My neighbor, she opposed it too, but she's now in hospital, living next to me. She's exactly behind the childcare center. But as I said, she's in hospital now for cancer treatment. Yes,
thank you for that. Two other supplementals, if I may. You made mention of 70 cars accessing the site, no doubt on a daily basis. Where did you get that information from? It's not the information that's been made available to me. Where did you get 70? And I think you said there was something like 118 or 180 objections. So just
21, I think. The first time the objections came, the first time people were invited, we went to talk to neighbors and like everybody complained. Then there was some reassessment and people had the opportunity to put motions again. And as everybody knows, people get tired, don't do it. So there were less. And then by the third time it was less, but the people are still against it. But the 70 cars I get from 58 children plus 19 staff. Plus, and I'm not counting the, yeah?
Yes, I see, Malcolm, there. May I also ask, how long have you been a resident at number 18 there? A number of years?
Almost 11 years.
And in terms of noise from the RAF base, with the use of planes coming in on the flight path, what's the level of noise that you experience there in that vicinity?
Well, it is not a lot because the planes fly occasionally, and they fly and they go off, so they just pass by. I don't know, it's a few minutes. While I'm a retired teacher, I retired because I have chronic migraines and I can't stand the noise. And I know that children play, scream, complain, fight. I mean, I've been a school teacher for so many years. I know that.
They do kid stuff. But in terms of noise, the RAF are not totally intrusive.
No, because for instance, I mean, we've been, it's just a few times a day, some days, and it's just a few minutes.
Yes. Right, Isabel, thank you very much. Nothing further, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Isabel, for your comments. And thank you for coming and attending the panel, attending the meeting.
Thank you for listening.
That's our job. I'll now, it's listed here, there are 3 people who are for this childcare centre at 6 Cueva Circuit. Is there someone here by the name of Charlie Baney?
Yeah, good morning, panel members. How are you?
Good morning. So you're here, I think the name says Baney Design, is
Yeah,
that right?
so we're the designers for the development. We also
Oh, yes.
have Brad de Lapierre, who's the town planner.
Oh, I was wondering who that was. Thank you.
Yeah, and we also have Haney, who's our traffic engineer. So basically,
Haney. It's spelt wrong. It's H-A-N-Y, is it? Not
yeah,
N-A-Y.
Haney, yeah,
Haney.
yeah.
Great. All right. So do you want to go first in speaking on behalf of the development?
Yeah, that's fine. And if you like, Brad and myself can start as well. So basically, as you're aware, council have recommended approval for the 58 Place Childcare Centre.
I'm happy to speak on behalf of the applicant, and then you can throw to
Yeah,
questions
that's
if you
fine.
want, if that's okay with the chair.
Yes, absolutely. You decide which way you want to do it. You each have
that's fine.
3 minutes.
No, thank you, Chair and fellow panel members. As has been outlined, this application was refused by the panel previously in April last year, and I'd like to say we've listened. The panel refused the application because it had a recommendation for refusal from council staff with regards to a lack of outdoor play space and effectively too much hard surface in the front setback. So we refined the design, and the current design for 58 children complies with the requirements for outdoor and indoor play spaces outlined in the report. And also we were able to increase landscaping within the front setback, and that's probably reflected in the fact that Williams' report to the panel recommends approval of the application. In terms of, I guess, briefly addressing Isabella's issues about traffic congestion and noise, as outlined in the report, this estate is an unusual one, in that there's the ability to exit the estate and enter the estate by foot from about 3 occasions, but there's only opportunity to enter and exit the estate by one vehicle point for car movements. But as outlined in Williams' report, there is a roundabout being constructed later this year that will ease those traffic concerns. And I note that notwithstanding that council's traffic engineers are supportive of the proposal currently, having regards to the additional movements our childcare centre will generate. In terms of parking provisions, the RMS rate suggests that we should have 14.5 spaces, and we provide 19 spaces in a basement car park. With regards to the school traffic conflict, I'm sure as council engineers and the panel is aware, is that a childcare centre, unlike a school, doesn't typically have concentrated pick-up and drop-off times. It tends to be more ad hoc as people drop kids off at school, go to work, leave for work. So it's not a concentrated pick-up and departure time like a school. In terms of noise, obviously said we're 58 children, and we did submit an acoustic report that indicates that, subject to construction measures and the management measures outlined in the report, that noise from the centre shouldn't have an unacceptable impact on surrounding residential properties. So, yeah, we thank council for the recommendation for approval. We agree with it. And as a team, we're here and happy to answer any questions panel members may have with regards to the application.
Okay, do panel members want to hear from all 3 persons for the childcare, or ask questions now of Mr. Baney?
I have a question, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Stapleton.
I'm speaking to Baney, am I?
Yes, that's right. Charlie Baney.
Right, thank you. I noticed there's a reference in the council's report to an acoustic, and in the condition and in the recommended conditions to acoustic report, which must be followed. The recommendations of acoustic report, which must be followed. But of course, I can't see the details. Does the acoustic report recommend closing all the windows?
I'll just have to open up the acoustic report and see. Just bear with me for a second.
Sorry, who's that speaking?
That's Charlie Baney, sorry.
And I didn't quite hear what your response was.
I'm just opening up the acoustic report now.
Oh, I'm very sorry.
Sorry.
Take your time.
No, I'll do as quick as possible.
And Madam Chair, it's Brad de Lapierre, the town planner as well. I'm also opening up the acoustic report, and I do have it open. And in terms of the question from Mr. Stapleton, section 6.2 of the acoustic report prepared by RSA Acoustics says, in order to achieve compliance with Council's noise requirement for outdoor play, the following must be implemented. The window must follow the configuration shown in figure 2.2. Windows can be open when children are not involved in indoor play or sleeping to allow for natural ventilation. So,
can you hear me still?
I can hear you, Mr. Stapleton.
So windows can be opened when the children aren't inside. Is that what you're saying?
No, the report says slightly different to that, Mr. Stapleton. It says windows can be open when children are not involved in indoor play or sleeping. So if there's, passive activities such as children are participating in art classes, for example, or artwork, or listening to a story being read, the windows can be open. If they're, pushing bicycles or similar toys around inside the childcare centre, or playing musical instruments, those kind of things, activities that are noisy, then the windows have to be shut. But what I call passive indoor activities, the windows are able to be open.
Is that left then to the people, the staff on site each day to determine?
That's correct. So obviously the educators are aware what activities are quiet and what activities are noisy. So if there's free play occurring within the indoor play areas, then the windows would be required to be shut. But if it's a structured element such as storytelling or artwork, then the windows could be open, and during sleep times the windows should be shut. So
I've got a couple of supplementary questions out of that, Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Stapleton.
Is it proposed to air condition or mechanically ventilate the whole building then?
I'd ask the architect, Mr. Baney, to respond to that, please.
Yes, it will be air conditioned.
Thank you. Now, I believe there is a management plan, a draft management plan.
That's correct,
Yes.
Mr. Stapleton.
Does that management plan deal with this issue of when the windows are closed?
Mr. Stapleton, from memory, it requires the use of the centre to be consistent with the recommendations in the acoustic report. That's correct.
The management plan requires the use of the place to be consistent with the acoustic report. Is that what you said?
That's correct, Mr. Stapleton. The operations of the centre are required to be consistent with the acoustic report.
Do you think the operators there every day will have a copy of the acoustic report pinned to the wall or something?
Well, certainly it's possible, but if you're suggesting that it would be appropriate to update the management plan to specifically recommend the references in the acoustic report, that's certainly a possible that I'm sure the panel or council staff could write a condition to that effect.
You'd be happy with the condition of approval that included revision of the management plan regarding when the windows were open?
Yes, no, we would be very accepting of that, because it's our intention to operate the centre in accordance with the recommendation of the acoustic report. And if there's additional measures to ensure that occurs in the actual operation, we're certainly accepting and would encourage that.
I noticed there's another condition about noise levels no more than 5 dB above ambient. Is that correct?
Mr. Stapleton, yes, that's my understanding that the recommendation from William includes that. And I guess that's a fairly typical recommendation from Council's Environmental Health Officer. So.
I saw it there in the conditions, in the recommended conditions. So that should keep everyone on their toes.
Yes, no, look, as town planner for the applicant, we're certainly aware that acoustics is a critical issue in the operation of any childcare centre, and that's certainly why we've got the detailed acoustic report and carefully considered it, and we're certainly accepting of any condition that reinforces the need for the centre to operate in a manner that doesn't unduly disturb the amenity of the surrounding properties. So.
Thank you. Just while we're still on noise, what about outside? What proportion of the time are the children outside?
With regards to the acoustic report, there's no restrictions as to when the children can be outside. So unlike some centres or some acoustic reports that require only limited children to play outside, is that they can play outside all day. There are restrictions on the number of children from various age groups that can be outside at any time, and certainly the centre operations take that. And I can read you from the acoustic reports that limits it. Out of the 58 children, there can be 5 children in the 0 to 2 age groups outside, 10 in the 2 to 3 year age groups, and 10 3 to 5 age groups outside at any time. So there's certainly, as a typical management, so that there's not a extensive number of children outside at the same time generating a lot of noise. Typically, I guess that was what the objective was referring to with children's schools that she'd worked in, where there's typically the whole school would be outside at set playtimes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stapleton. Any other questions of Mr. Lapierre?
Yes, Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Lapierre, Paul Rogers, Community Representative. I've got Google Earth happening again, and if you can do likewise, or at least I have a number of questions, but the first one leading off, the circuit is exactly that, a circuit. You would anticipate people driving up into Keita Circuit from Matheson Street. Do you envisage in traffic flow that there'd be a drop off and a continuation around the circuit? In other words, around 14, 18, 26, and then exiting along Matheson? Or do you anticipate somebody doing a 3-point turn within Keita Circuit and then going back out Matheson? I'm just trying to get a visualization in terms of the traffic flow. Are we going to have like a throughput flow, or are we going to have a back up and reverse out type flow?
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. I envisage that given there's a basement car park for 19 car parking spaces, that as you suggest, people would access the centre by coming off Grosvenor Road into Sunnyside Crescent, turning left into Madison Avenue, and then left into Keita Circuit, and then turning right into the driveway at 6 Keita Circuit into the basement car park, parking in that basement car park, and upon leaving, they would turn left into Keita Circuit and then right into Madison. So I don't anticipate that there would be any traffic driving past the objectors' properties from 18 Keita Circuit that we heard from. So there would be no need to do so. And having regards to the road network, most motorists, in my experience, would take the shortest route to exit the site, which would be back turning left out of the basement car park into Keita Circuit and then right onto Madison Avenue. Being
of human nature, as we all are, you don't anticipate any drop off at the front gate, as it were, or out on the street, and with a sort of the latch kid sort of approach where Johnny or Bessie have sort of waved off across the verge into the premises. Do you?
No, Mr. Rogers, I don't. Given that it's a childcare centre and not a school, there's a requirement for our children to be signed in and out and discussions with educators. So in that regard, in my mind, it's different to a school where you, as you say, you throw Johnny out of the car with the school bag and say, see you later. It's a childcare centre where the children need to be signed in and out each day. So on that basis, there's a need for the vehicle to stop and the guardian and the child to exit the vehicle at the same time to sign in. So on that basis, I think it's very likely that they would utilise the 19 spaces in the basement car park.
Right. If I may, Madam Chair, just extrapolate on this now. Access into this part of North Richmond is a challenge at best through Sunnyside because of the way of the access and egress onto Grosvenor Road. And as we all know, there's a proposed roundabout going in there, and the community has mixed views on that, have made some fairly strong comments about the potential bottleneck, the frustration where the placement is for the pedestrian crossing to the school, etc. The anticipated further development at the old Peel's Dairy over there at Redbank, the data that I've read in the report seems to identify the existing traffic flows, the existing usage and anticipated usage of the flows dealing with that roundabout. Did you look at any sort of future projections that with development with Redbank further down Grosvenor Road, that bottleneck argument that has been floated as a frustration is going to also be exacerbated with more cars here in Keita Circuit? So I'm sort of looking to the future.
Can I interrupt for a minute? I don't know if this is directly relevant to the DA, that's the decision that's before us today. If you can keep it.
Well, it's only.
Is there any other questions you want to ask?
It is relevant in terms of the statement that says it's currently sustainable. There is a application for council to consider the roundabout, and I'm suggesting that there must be other statistics available as to the future projection. Is this just an ongoing frustration that there's going to be more cars? And
well, I'm not sure if Mr. Lapierre can answer that, but do you want to comment at all, Mr. Lapierre?
Thank you, Chair. Look, I'm happy to give it a brief
Thank
go.
you.
You know, as you outlined, I'm a town planner, not a traffic engineer. In terms of our traffic report, it's certainly considered the impact from the existing traffic. The comment I can make about, in respect of the intersection we're talking about, our traffic engineer and council traffic engineers were comfortable that having regard to the existing situation, i.e., with the roundabout not constructed, that intersection will have a satisfactory level of service, and our report and the traffic report from council notes that after the roundabout is constructed, there will be an improvement to it. In terms of did our traffic report consider other possible developments in the wider precinct, the answer to that is no. In terms of whether council considered that, I'll be honest, it's a question best for council staff, but I would assume that council staff are aware of possible future developments in the immediate precinct.
yes, thank you for that. Final question, if I may, Madam Chair. More a matter just for confidence and comfort to the community. Recently, Redbank, the area of Redbank, was subject to an evacuation because of certain threats during our flooding period. This particular site has no connection to that particular evacuation order. Is that correct?
Yeah, my understanding is it doesn't, but again, I would suspect that council staff may be better able to answer that question than myself.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Now we have two other speakers listed to speak for the childcare centre. Mr. Hani Takla, would you like to speak?
Yeah, hi. I'm a panel member.
Sorry, I'll just interrupt.
Speak up. Can you hear me now?
Yes, you state your name and
yep,
you.
Hani Takla. I'm a traffic engineer from SignInOut Consultant. We are the traffic engineer involved in this project from the beginning, and we did the traffic report, and we undertake all the analysis, CIDRA analysis around the intersection of Grosvale Road and Sunnyside Crescent. Just in addition of what Mr. Brad mentioned, the proposed traffic generation from the center has been considered with the existing traffic at this intersection, and it came up as the future level of service of the intersection not going to change or alter the level of service or the performance of the intersection as it is. And obviously after the construction of the roundabout that's been mentioned by the council report, this will add extra traffic calming device and the relocation of the Wombat pedestrian crossing. That will improve the intersection further. But as the proposed development itself is not going to alter or change the condition of the traffic around this intersection. And may I add as well, the layout of the car park of the center has been altered and improved by creating a turn area for the car to turn around within the basement and exit in forward direction, and instead of doing three-point turn on the street. So that's been included on the latest plan as well.
Okay, is that do the panel members have any further questions for Mr. Tackler, recognising that I think some questions have already been asked of Mr. de Lapierre about traffic, but is there anything anyone wants to ask Mr. Tackler, given he's the traffic engineer?
Mr. Tackler clarified a point that I was concerned about. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Nothing from me.
Okay, now what does Mr. Baney want to speak on behalf of the development?
No, no further comments from me. Thank you.
Okay. Now, Mr. Pillion, the council officer, is there anything that you wanted to say to assist the panel that's arisen out of those issues discussed with the proponents?
No, I think the majority of issues raised have been covered in the report.
Okay, then. So I think that's, if there's no other further person present who wants to speak either for or against the proposed childcare centre at 6 Keita Circuit, I think that's the end of that item.
Madam Chair, could I ask Mr. Pillion a question?
Yes, you may, Mr. Stapleton.
Just a question about my suggestion that we have a condition to amend the management plan in regard to the opening and closing of windows. Do you see that as feasible?
Yes, we can prepare conditions to that effect. There are some comments and documents in the management plan about review, about the use, and also complaints hotlines and how complaints will be dealt with if noise matters do arise as a result of keeping windows open during certain times of the day. But yes, we can address that with the condition.
My object here would be just to define more fully what's a passive and active use inside. It seemed a bit vague, and it also the availability of the requirement to close the windows doesn't seem very obvious if it's not in the management plan, if it's only in the acoustic report. So that was my object. That's my object in suggesting to the panel in a few minutes that we have such a condition.
Yes, it could definitely be flashed out and specified in a condition.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pillion. So that is, there's no other.
Madam Chair, if I may ask the council officer a question, please. For purposes of just clarity and for the record, and for those who don't live this side of the river, I asked a question of one of the applicant's representatives in relation to this site being potentially subject to the Redbank Dam evacuation order during our recent floods. It's not a self-serving question, but when that evacuation order was made, this side of the river in that part of the North Richmond area was committed to a state of panic. And bearing in mind that panic was short-lived and misdescription arose out of which dam was involved, I think when we're dealing with a topic dealing with 58 plus children, we need clarity. So just for the record, if I may, Madam Chair, could council give clarification that this site was outside the evacuation order recently associated with the Redbank Dam scare, please?
And the flooding, that just add the word flooding event, I think.
Yes, yes.
Can you address that, Mr. Pillion?
Yeah, it was the subject site in Gracevale Road was outside of that evacuation area. But as you pointed out, there was a misunderstanding as to which dams or components of Redbank were at risk to people in North Richmond.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. Thank you. Nothing more, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, could I make one more comment about the acoustics, please?
Who was that speaking, sorry?
This is resident of Keita Circuit number 18. I'm Isabel Cueva's husband.
Oh, hi, we don't have your name there. Just give me your full name, please.
My surname is Boer, B-O-E-R, and first name is Matthias, M-A-T-T-H-I-A-S, and I've submitted in 3 rounds of submissions about this.
Yes. Well, normally you have to register to speak, but I will allow you to speak today as you're requesting, but you must confine your comments to 3 minutes, please.
I can do that. Thank you. Now, I just wanted to extend the questions of Mrs. Stapleton, because my understanding is that the windows of the facility need to be closed when children are playing inside. I suppose that is to reduce noise leakage to the surrounding residents. So I wonder if windows need to be closed to reduce noise affecting residents around the childcare center. The outside playing areas have no windows, as far as I know, and they play all day outside there. So how is that not a problem then? If playing inside creates noise to a level that windows need to be closed to reduce noise leakage to residents, how come that the outside playing areas, which can be used all day by a significant number of children, how come that does not seem to be a problem for residents? And adults of the childcare center staff speaking in loud voices to keep the children in check. I'd like a comment on that, please.
So who are you directing that to?
I guess to Mr. de Lapierre.
Are you there, Mr. de Lapierre?
I am, Madam Chair. I'm happy to respond if you permit. So
Yes, please. Could you please respond?
yes, I'm happy to. So in terms of the recommendation for the windows, my understanding is to do with the cumulative impact. So if we had children playing inside and outside at the time, the noise at the receivers, including the objector's property, would be excessive. But with the windows closed during internal play and outdoor play still occurring, our acoustic report indicates that with the acoustic fences and the other measures, that the noise level received at surrounding properties will be acceptable and not cause undue nuisance. So the primary reason for the windows to be closed is to not have the indoor and outdoor play noise being received by surrounding properties.
Mr. de Lapierre, you are aware that of the acoustic report where actually the noise levels were very close to or even exceeding the recommended levels. And as I outlined in my response or my submission, the acoustic report cannot really substantiate that there is a very small possibility that noise levels exceed that level. I think the measured noise levels are very close to the permitted levels. Noise scales, the decibel scale is a logarithmic scale, if that makes sense to you. So 1 decibel above the norm is not just 1 decibel, that is actually quite a lot above the permitted noise level. And I think you have made an idealized picture in that noise report. And there's still a very substantial risk that noise levels will exceed the permitted levels for much of the time. And I don't see in the reporting that there is any guarantee that that will not be the case.
Is there anything further you want to say, Mr. de Lapierre?
Yeah, look, happy to certainly respond. There's a table 5.5 in the acoustic reports talks about the impacts of play activities at neighbouring residents, and you're right, it does talk about some DBA criteria, and it talks about in one table that one receiver, and I haven't gone through the report to where that is in relation to the objector that just spoke, is that we predict that noise levels will be 32 dBA, and the criteria is 41 dBA, so that criteria would be 9 dBA less. So we certainly acknowledge, and I guess Mr. Stapleton outlined earlier, that there is potential for noise to go above that, and that's why council has imposed that 5 dBA above background noise condition. That's fairly standard, and we're obviously comfortable we can achieve that with the combination of management measures and physical construction measures that will occur as part of the project.
If I may, one more comment, please. Your prediction of noise levels have an uncertainty range, I suppose, because your predictions are not precise. Do you have any indications of how large those uncertainty margins are and how likely you are going to go over the permitted noise levels, given that uncertainty. I didn't see that in your noise report.
And I guess first of all, I should say I'm the town planner, not from Rodney Stevens Acoustics, and I'll be honest that the point of your last question, it goes above my technical abilities to respond. So
I think that's correct, Mr. Bohr, that it's not within Mr. de Lapierre's expertise. What you are asking a rather technical question about measurement of sound and the parameters that are involved. I think that I've given you, I've given you leave to speak without notice.
Thank you.
That question, I think, can't really be answered now. Have you looked at the materials that relate to this development in today's meeting notes? And also, you might want to look online on council's website. Is there anything further you wanted to ask about? That's not related to noise, because I think that has been ventilated.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just hope that the panel will take this uncertainty in predictions of noise levels into account when they make a decision.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We certainly listen very intently to what the neighbours and residents say in these matters. Now, is there anything, Mr. Pillion, you wish to add to what the issues that Mr. Bohr has raised?
No, as the same in terms of the technical abilities of myself. I'm in the planning section, so
Yeah.
I don't have that technical response.
Okay, then, so there's no other further comment or people want to speak or ask questions in relation to item 2, which is the proposed daycare at 6 Keita Circuit. I'm very sorry. That was me. Madam Chair's phone. I'm very sorry about that. So if there's nothing further that anyone wants to say in respect of this item on the agenda today. Am I right? Okay, so we will move on now. You are excused, Ms. Guerre Fernandez and Mr. Bohr, and also Mr. Baney, Mr. Tackler, and Mr. de Lapierre. You're welcome to stay on if you want to, but your item has now finished. And as I said at the beginning, we will adjourn at the end of hearing on each of the DAs, and we'll be discussing the matters and you'll be notified of our decision. Is that clear to people? I've just said can leave the meeting. Can you just indicate?
Yeah, they've already, Madam Chair, they've actually already left the meeting.
Already meeting. Okay, then. All right. So we're going to move on to item 3, which is DA 0196/20 in respect of 88B Bulgamutta Road, Barrambing.
Can I just stop you, Madam Chair? We actually have a request to bring forward an item on the agenda, so deal with item 4 rather than item 3 at the moment. We have.
I thought that might be a sensible thing to do, so thank you. Because we don't appear to have anyone registered to speak about it. So we'll turn now to item 4, which is...
We do have Mr. Lionel Bucket, who is wanting to speak against the recommendation on item 4.
Oh, really? Says here on the meeting notes, he's speaking against item 3.
Item 4 is the Wilberforce property, isn't it?
Yes.
3 is.
I'm sorry. Yes, it is item 3. Sorry. Yes, if we could just, Mr. Bucket actually was mistaken about the meeting time. So he's just joined the meeting now to have his item heard. So yes, if you could deal with Mr. Bucket's item first, that would be great.
But that is item 3.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Apologies.
That is, hello, Mr. Bucket, are you present? Is he present on the phone or by video?
He's joining now.
Well, I'm dealing with the items then in the meeting in the agenda. Is everyone clear on that? Yeah.
Yes, I'm clear.
Thanks, Mr. Stapleton. Okay. Can the town planner who was involved in this matter, which is, I'll just go back. It's a Barambing matter. Can you identify yourself, please?
Thanks, Madam Chair. My name's Andrew Johnston. I'm a town planner here at Hawkesbury Council, and I've prepared the report.
Thank you, Mr. Johnston. So before I go any further, is Mr. Bucket present in the meeting? Jody, do you know where he is?
Hello.
Yes,
Yes.
he's in the meeting.
Oh, hi, Mr. Bucket. My name's Louise Byrne, and I'm the chair of the local planning panel today. There are 3 other members of it who are present, who are Mr. Brunton, Mr. Rogers, and Mr. Stapleton.
Hello.
And we determine whether the development application should go ahead. Does that make sense to you? You weren't here at the preamble that I gave earlier on.
Yeah.
The decision will not be announced in open session today. What happens is we listen to the people who object, the people who are for development, and then we go to a closed session and discuss it between us with the assistance of the council officers who've been involved. And then the decision will be notified on the council website after that. I should also say to you that this is being recorded, and you give your consent to under the private, I'll just find this, under the Privacy and Personal Information Protection Act, personal information provided at the meeting will be recorded. The provision of any information that is recorded is voluntary on your behalf. Any person who does not wish to be recorded should not address the panel. Do you understand that?
Yes.
And also we observe certain levels of courtesy in the meetings. People should refrain from making any insults, allegations, or personal comments against persons present or not at this meeting. And that relates to your address, obviously, to what you say and any answers you give to questions from the panel. There are other matters, formal matters that I said in the opening concerning conflicts of interest of the 4 panel members. And for your information, rather than me go through all of that now, you can access that. This recording will be available on the council website. Am I right there, Jody, or where is it available?
Yeah, the minutes will be on the council website. I will just let you know that actually if a decision is made by the panel today on all 3 items, that when you come back from closed session, that you do announce what your decisions are that the panel has made. So it's
Yes.
on the podcast and public record.
Right. Okay. Is there any other question you have, Mr. Bucket, before
Yeah,
I ask you to speak?
my planner, David Jones, I can't see him on the boxes of people.
Are you for the development or against it?
It's my development and I'm against the recommendation.
Oh, I see. Sorry. Yeah, the way this table's drafted, I thought it indicated against the actual development, but you're for the development.
Yes.
And it's your, okay, well, I think everyone's familiar with what this DA is. I didn't, you can see that on the pages. Is everyone familiar with this matter? Everyone read the papers?
Yes, I'm familiar.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Bucket, you have 3 minutes to speak. Is there anyone else attending today in respect of this matter from your side?
There should be David Jones.
Is David Jones present in this meeting? Is he intending on coming?
I have not seen any application for him to come into the Zoom meeting. I know he did apply to speak on our council website, but he has not logged into the meeting.
Okay. All right, Mr. Bucket. Can you have 3 minutes to state your position in relation to this DA? I think. Okay, do you want to start?
Yeah, okay. My name is Lionel Bucket. My sister-in-law is Mary Lyons Bucket, who's a councillor. I've lobbied councillors for the appointment of a planning administrator since the Black Summer bushfire burnout Bilpin district and other parts of the Hawkesbury. I understand that the council's decision of my DA must be reviewed by you to make sure it's right. I engaged David Jones Design Landscape Services to help me prepare and submit my DA. I paid for a pre-lodgement advice meeting with the council's senior planners. They asked me to provide many things, including written legal opinion that my development had commenced and I had existing use rights. I did everything they asked, and the legal opinion cost me $15,000. I lodged the DA after this date. From time to time, I rang up the senior planners to see how my DA was progressing. Then I had a phone conversation with the planning manager who told me they didn't accept my legal opinion that I had commencement. They told me council was going to get another opinion. We had an argument because I reckon they shouldn't have asked me to get legal opinion if council was going to use it to get an alternative one to argue that I had no legal commencement. In the end, council got 2 further legal opinions on whether I had commencement, one of which is included in attachment 3 of the submission to you to reject my DA. Anyway, as you can imagine, things weren't going the way the pre-DA lodgement advice meeting indicated they would, but I couldn't do anything until the planning manager wrote to me rejecting my DA. On March 7, I received an email from council saying my DA was rejected and will be heard by you on 17 March. The letter didn't give any reasons for the rejection. So I wrote to the council the next day and asked for a copy of their reasons for rejection and time to put together a submission on why you should approve my DA. On March 9, council provided me with planning panel business paper and I was able to read the 30-page submission regarding my DA. Council submission includes my legal opinion on which my DA proposal was based, and one of their legal opinions is contained in attachment 3 on which they are rejecting my DA. Then on March 10, the General Manager wrote to me regarding the timeframe I had to respond to their submission and said the report to the upcoming planning panel has been prepared and notified with the prescribed timeframe. I thought council's behaviour was wrong, so I read the New South Wales Department of Planning panel guidelines. The guidelines say an applicant before a planning panel must be given a reasonable time to respond. I reckon 1 day to respond to a 30-page submission is not reasonable. And the guidelines say the council is supposed to provide the panel with reasons if they want to keep anything confidential. I can't see in their submission recommending my rejection of my DA where they have done this. Finally, the guidelines, I say, need the permission of the panel to be legally represented. I say I need the permission of the panel to be legally represented when you decide my DA. My solicitor told me to come today and ask for your permission to be legally represented at a panel and to ask you to defer hearing my application until your next meeting. This will give me time to prepare a submission for you to consider and have an advocate who can answer any questions you may have when you decide on the DA. I think both those legal opinions should be attached, and I would ask that you defer this until I can be properly considered in my submission.
Okay. I hear all of that. So you're really just asking that the whole matter be deferred to a further meeting of the panel. Is there anything you want to say anyway about the development? It could be helpful.
No, not until I can have legal advice on the submission from the council.
Now, can I just ask, is there someone else speaking there? I can hear someone else speaking. It would be
Yeah.
helpful if they wanted to speak to the meeting, they can.
No, there's not. I'm in my office and my office worker just walked in.
Okay. All right then. Okay, so
Madam Chair, I've just been informed that Mr. Bucket's representative, David Jones, will be logging into the meeting shortly. If
yes.
you wouldn't mind waiting a couple of moments.
Okay, thank you for that. Does anyone do, I don't know if you do this in these Zoom meetings, but does anyone want a 5-minute break?
Yes, please, Madam Chair.
Okay, well, let's recommence at 11:20 a.m. Is that suitable to everybody? Jody, is that suitable
fine.
to you?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'll just have to pause the live streaming.
Okay, 11:20, we will resume.
Thank you.
Everyone take a break.
Thank you.
Okay, all you have to do, because they'll press you to do this, all you have to do is say, no, it's unfair, as you haven't had a chance to prepare your submission. Okay? And stick to your guns. Because the role is to come on up here.
Let's try and push it on.
No, it's unfair. So otherwise, and you argue any little bit of it, okay, you're into it, done. Yeah.
Madam Chair, I'm not sure if you heard me before the break, but I did indicate that I'd like to ask a question of Mr. Bucket, if I may.
Okay, Mr. Rogers, no, that's no problem. We'll just get everyone back on board.
I believe the live stream is now good to go.
And do we now have Mr. Jones in the room? Has he arrived yet?
I did let him into the meeting, but he's not on the list. Oh, yes, he is. He's just there. David.
Yep. Yes,
Hold
Louise.
on a sec.
Just had another.
Mr. Jones, David Jones?
Yes, yeah, had a technical problem of my own, apart from mistakenly thinking the meeting was tomorrow. I'm sorry. Apologies.
Okay, so I'm just making sure. And the council officer who dealt with this matter is Mr. Johnston. You're there, Mr. Johnston?
I am, Madam Chair.
Yes. Okay, now, Mr. Jones, Mr. Bucket was speaking before you came into the meeting. Do you want to, sorry, I'll just go back one step. You weren't here when I gave the preamble at the beginning, and I'm not going to go through it again. You can, I think it's available on the council website, but you understand that if you speak, you're agreeing to that, that what you say being recorded.
Correct. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, and we observe normal rules here of politeness and no, insulting and throwing things at people.
Yes.
I'm joking, but you understand what I mean about the
No, I've done a few of these before
in the meeting. Okay, so Mr. Bucket, was there anything further you wanted to say? Because we have questions. We have at least one question from a panel member for you.
I don't know that we have Lionel. Is he?
Yes, he is here. Mr. Bucket, can you hear me? He's on mute. We can't hear you, Mr. Bucket.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah, so do you want to say anything further, because we have some questions for you, or at least one question's been flagged from Mr. Rogers. Do you,
Only that, just to say again, I would like the time to do a proper submission, and I haven't had the time. I don't think it's fair or reasonable, the time that I've had.
okay, now, Mr. Rogers.
Yes, thank you, Madam
You
Chair.
asked a question. You can ask Mr. Bucket a question. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Bucket, good to see you again. I was particularly taken when you mentioned that you only had 1 day's notice. I took a note of that. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? The 1 day's notice. What did that involve? Because it also relates to perhaps further questions I may ask of Mr. Jones a little later. But what did you mean by you only had 1 day's notice? Could you elaborate on that, please?
I didn't get a copy of the submission until I think it was the 9th, like for council submission. So then my understanding
is that the business paper? Is that what you're referring to, Mr. The business paper?
The business paper. I didn't get that till then. And then from my understanding, the panel gets documents to look at 6 days before. So that's what I'm referring to. So I think you should have time to consider, or at the same time to consider my submission as the council's submission. So I only had 1 day's notice.
Yes, thank you for that, Mr. Bucket. Madam Chair, I will also make some comments in relation to time relating to receipt of submissions at the appropriate time, not in response to what Mr. Bucket said, but in relation to the receipt of my documentation, because the issue of time is an issue for consideration. So I do thank Mr. Bucket for that, and no further questions.
Does anyone else have any further questions of Mr.
Yes.
Bucket?
Yep. Ian Stapleton, I have a question.
Go right ahead, Mr. Stapleton.
Mr. Bucket, the council's paper says the development was originally issued and the development consent number was MA 1308/01 for a tourist facility. Is that correct?
Yes.
Council now say that, or the council office report says the tourist facility is a prohibited development. Can you explain why council would give you consent for a prohibited development?
I understand existing use rights was what they asked for.
Could you elaborate on that? What existing use was there before your development was approved?
I don't know anything about like the legalities of before the approval.
Well, what was the land used for?
The land?
Yes.
The land was 628 acres of, well, it was used for forestry.
So it was just bushland, was it?
No, it wasn't just bushland.
What was there?
It had a history of being logged.
Right.
Had a long history of being logged.
Right. And any buildings on it?
Yes.
It had the 600 acres was one bit of land, and there were DAs on there for a house. So I'm not sure at that point how far the house had been progressed.
Right. There might have been some animals, maybe some grazing or something.
Yes.
Yes, from time to time.
All right, that's all on that. Thanks. Now, the council office report also says that the cabins you have built have altered locations and designs in comparison with the approved plans. Is that correct?
That's that's arguable. Like,
Okay, I'll accept
I
that.
would say that the cabin DA didn't have a survey layout. It's a mud map for location.
Right. Okay.
Didn't have a condition.
Have they got altered designs?
That's arguable as well.
Okay. Is to bring those cabins into planning approval, is that why you've submitted this present DA?
Well, the present DA I did as a response to a complaint and council asking me to, it's really the council's submission to overcome their issues. So,
No, I'll repeat my question. Was the DA to bring what was approved and what you actually built into line?
yes.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Brunton, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I've just got a couple of questions just to clarify some of the history. The first one relates to, with the application, there was some certificates issued by the engineering company Kneebones. They were prepared in 2018 and 2019. And they say that they want you to install some evacuation safety lighting. Now, that's going to take a fair amount of work, I would have thought. Are you able to do that sort of work or get that done?
That's long been done.
That's been done already.
Yeah.
So you mean last year or when was it done? After that report or before the report?
Years ago. I'd have to look up when, but that's been done for years.
Okay.
So for years.
So their report was wrong, was it? And saying that you needed to do it?
No, their report. Well, Kneebone and Beretta and Hall are engineers.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that their report would refer to that. Maybe some other report did. But in any event, the place has all its fire emergency approvals in place.
Okay, that's fine.
It would be the BCA report.
Yeah. Yeah, but the BCA report was the BCA report on each of the houses, which was done a couple of years ago, was the one that mentioned Kneebone's report. But if the lighting's there, that's fine. You don't have to, it doesn't have to go in, it's already there. A couple of questions about the history. Now, the consent for the development was issued in 2003, and your solicitor says that the development started in 2006. So what part of the development happened in 2006?
That's the house I mentioned before. So there's a DA for a house is also on the land before it's subdivided. But we used the house from 2006.
Right. So, and what, it was just a house, was it? Like that was your residence while the work was about to go on, was it?
No, it was a house. The place is has a management statement. This is the aim of the place is ecotourism. It's signed off by council. So the house was approved on the 624 acres before a subdivision was complete. There was a lot of time to do a lot of work. We had to build the council about $1 million worth of road for free as part of the cabin development, DA. So that took, and you could imagine the road that I had to build the council as part of the DA serves 5 other properties.
Yeah.
And the road ended up with having like a section of it had a spring in it which blew the pricing out to buggery, excuse the French. So the doing the works for the council ended up sucking up a lot of the budget, which took, and also a lot of time. The only council contribution to the road was providing the engineer inspections. So essentially, I'm a builder, I'm an experienced builder, and I built this road. I enjoyed building the road. I didn't enjoy building it for free for council entirely, as you would imagine. But it had unexpected extra costs in it. So about the same time as building the road for them, we also built a house to get some income in. At the same time, around the same time, the DA for the cabins was done. So that all of these things were on the 624 acres. And after the subdivision was completed, they ended up in, designated spots depending on where the boundaries were.
Okay, so
there's a mistake in that. That's why I should have time to properly do a submission, because you can see there's mistakes in the council's submission.
Well, I'll just clarify. You just tell me this is right or wrong. So there was a consent issued for a house to be built on the large lot of 600 acres.
Yeah.
You built that, and then you let it out to get some income, but it wasn't a house that was approved as part of the tourist resort. It was approved as just a house.
Yes.
Okay. So there's two separate consents there.
Yes.
Okay. So then the following year, you put in the application for your construction certificate, and you got approval from, I don't know, may have even been David, to build the cabins.
That'd be Urban City. We issued the CC.
Yeah, okay, Urban City, that's right. So by 2012, when the development then became prohibited, how many cabins had you actually finished?
2.
So you had 2, okay. And then you kept building more?
Well, hang on a sec. I'm not going to, I'm allowing all sorts of questioning of Mr. Bucket, but when it might have some legal ramification, I'm not going to allow him to be questioned, to be ambushed, because you've just said became prohibited, and then you asked him, then you built more. So the inference being that if he built any after it became prohibited, that may have been unlawfully built. I'm just concerned here about ambushing Mr. Bucket, who is a layperson, and he doesn't have his lawyers present. He's requested that his lawyer be present. There is a significant legal issue in this matter, and I would just ask you to be fair in questioning Mr. Bucket.
Yeah, and I was using shorthand, that's okay. So my final question is, by 2012, had you received an occupation certificate?
On the house, I think I did.
Right. Okay, that's all right.
Are there any other questions from other people before I move on to Mr. Jones?
None from me, Madam Chair.
Okay. Mr. Rogers, you've already questioned.
Yes, I have a question in anticipation of Mr. Jones, but not until he's finished his presentation.
All right, Mr. Bucket. So stay on the line, Mr. Bucket, because we're moving now on to Mr. Rogers. Oh, sorry, Mr. Jones. So, Mr. Jones, can you just state what your involvement is, well, whatever it is you want to say. It's your chance try to limit it to 3 minutes, please.
Will do. Thank you for that. I'm the applicant on Lionel's behalf for this application, for the development application for the, what we call the
And if you're
treehouse.
qualified, sorry, will you state your qualification, state what your qualification?
Building consultant and building planning consultant.
Okay.
And I'm the applicant on Lionel's behalf.
Yes.
And we've worked very closely. I wasn't involved in the original development, but I've had to pick up and really organise all the documentation for this application, which runs to the 25 or 27 supplementary documents. I guess my first submission would be that there's a sort of complex legal discussion going on about the legal commencement of the tourist facility, which I didn't think was anything but pretty clear cut. While it has a development approval for a tourist facility, he has a CC for he has a commencement notice, which was sent to council, and he's got inspections of footings. So in my view, the commencement is pretty clear cut, but council have a legal opinion, which we haven't been able to see, which disputes that. So I think it's, I guess that was why I was asking for a deferral, really, because we really need our lawyers to look at council's legal opinion, if we can get it, and just see why the $15,000 barrister's opinion that we've got disagrees with council's legal opinion as to whether there's a legal commencement. The whole application rests on Lionel having a legal commencement of his tourist facility approval, which then runs through the, I guess what happened was that the tourist facility in 2012 LEP was removed from this zoning, but because Lionel's approval predates that, then his tourist facility approval actually runs through the 2012 right up to the present date. So I guess that,
yes,
they're my 2 points. One is we really need our legal people to look at this, and secondly, I don't see that there's any real question. I don't see why this is an issue, that when the documentation is very clear that he's got a legal commencement, and that's running through to this point. So that shouldn't be what seems to be the underpinning of council's recommendation for a refusal.
And okay, so have you read the report of Mr. Johnston that's in these papers?
Yes, yep.
And you'll note that, I just have a question for you, page 65 of the meeting notes. The council officer advised you that that's now not, it's now a permissible, an ecotourist facility is now permissible use. Can you see the top of the page 65?
Page 65, yep.
And so whereas it was prohibited at the time of lodging the DA, as it now, an ecotourist facility is a permissible use under the Hawkesbury LEP 2012.
Yep. That's something I don't want to sort of get into an argument with Andrew Johnson, but I think he's a very good planner, but that's not our understanding. We were sort of advised that the application should continue. I mean, I'm pretty sure that we raised this ourselves. Should we withdraw and submit an ecotourist?
Well, he's saying there that you were advised that you should withdraw it.
That's not my understanding, and I've got.
Just read that sentence. Council has advised, I'll read it out for the record. Yep. Council has advised the applicant and owner to withdraw the subject application, instead prepare an application for an ecotourist facility, which is now a permissible use under the Hawkesbury LEP 2012. Request to withdraw the application has been declined by the owner. So that second sentence obviously is correct.
Well, that's, I think it comes down to timing, but at the time of the early, 'cause this is a 2-year-old application. So in the early stages of the application, we made that suggestion ourselves. Andrew asked us to continue with this application. And then,
Well,
if that
his
request
words
has
there
been made, that's been made to Lionel. It has never been made to me. It must have been made to Lionel in, as a recent event, I would think.
So your main submission, though, is you'd like the further time to consider the issues and for your Mr. Bucket's lawyers to consider the legal issues. Is that correct?
I think that's pretty important, yes. Yep.
Putting that to one side, is there anything you want to say about the merits of the proposal, or you rely on the documents you've lodged, or?
We rely on the documents. It's been, this is pretty messy. I guess everyone's got that sense. But for instance, the BCA requirements, if you look at document 23 of our submission, it lists the 4 areas which weren't compliant, and those have now been attended to. So there's been very extensive sort of reports prepared, and then any issues have been dealt with. So I think that in terms of the technical aspects, the BCA compliance, the bushfire safety, the structural, all those aspects have been dealt with. So then it's really then down to this question of the existing use and the permissibility.
Okay. So does anyone have, any of the panel members have any questions of Mr. Jones?
Yes, if I may, Madam Chair. Paul Rogers, community rep. David, nice to meet you again.
Yes.
A couple of concerns. Lionel Bucket indicated that he had notice of the Hawkesbury matter before the agenda on the 8th of March. Did you get the same sort of notice electronically about the 8th?
The sequence of events, I've got an email saying that the matter was going to the planning panel, and at that stage we weren't apprised of the agenda or the report. So I sent a couple, and we were told that we would get that, I think, yesterday. So I think we need a bit more time. So I sent an email to Nicole Miller at Council, who was good enough to sort of, I guess, send me an early version of this agenda until we finished up getting it late last week. So.
Well, thank you for clarifying, because it relates to my earlier question of Mr. Bucket. I received the electronic papers on Tuesday the 8th. Tuesday the 8th, the Hawkesbury River was in flood. All 3 bridges were out. We were somewhat landlocked. There was even problems with getting over by the road because there was blockages with landslips, etc. And I've just put this on the record that for those of us who live on this side of the river, we are severely impacted from time to time with both bushfire and flooding. And even though the Barambing is much higher than the river, the reality is that we do become landlocked. And I just put it for the record that I empathise with the issue of delay, because I myself did not receive my paper copies of the Express Post until yesterday, the day before today's meeting. So I did have the electronic version as of Tuesday the 8th, but my paper version didn't arrive until yesterday. So I am empathetic to the issue of notice. But the questions I do have of Mr. Jones, you did write to Council on the 14th of March with a series of dot points setting out your concerns and reasons for a deferral. Do you recall that email?
Correct, yes, yep.
And do you have access to that at the moment? There's a couple of
questions.
That's
in front of me now, yes, yep.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to take Mr. Jones to paragraph 4 of that letter, which I think we all would have access to. It forms part of an email stream that has been circulated between members of the panel previously. And whereas Mr. Jones says at point 4, the planning report contains anomalies and assertions not supported by documentation. These could be misleading to the planning panel and require a detailed response. So my concern as a member of this planning panel in giving consideration of this matter, that what you're saying, Mr. Jones, is that the planning report, which I'm relying on, which we are all relying on, you say contains anomalies and assertions not supported by documentation. There is extensive documentation connected with this proposal. These could be misleading to the planning panel and require detailed response. That concerns me. What would you like to say further on that? Because I am concerned that we are not being misled or in any way not being given all the information that we can make a proper decision on.
2 points that alludes to. The planning report basically says that somebody had told the planner that the commencement was 2006. There's nothing in our statement of environmental effects that says that, so that assertion has come from, that's a verbal, has come from somewhere else. The timeline that I've got in my statement of environmental effects refers to the 2007 CC and commencement, and from my point of view, that's the date of commencement. So to say that work was commenced in 2006, which makes it unlawful because it predates the approval, is well, certainly confusing, but I would have thought also a little bit misleading. And the second point actually goes to that advice that's saying that we're requested to withdraw the application. I've never had that request myself. We actually suggested that we, should we switch over to an eco-tourist application? And the advice at that time from council's planners was not to do that, to continue with this application. Again, so and there's no documentation, there's no email to support that. So I think that to sort of include that into the report is, again, confusing and possibly misleading.
Right. So, and you are formally the applicant on behalf of Mr. Bucket.
Correct. Yeah. Yep.
Yes. All right. Very well. Thank you. Thank you for that, and thank you, Madam Chair. No further questions.
Can I interrupt for 1 minute? Jody, is it relevant that the email that was referred to then from Mr. David Jones to the council should be included in the papers? Should I move? I'd like to move that that be included in the papers of the meeting.
I'd second that.
Yes, we could use that as tabled correspondence in the meeting minutes.
Thank you. So I'll just to make it clear, it's an email from Mr. David Jones of Monday, the 15th of March, 2022 to Hawkesbury City Council, CC Andrew Johnston at Hawkesbury Council, and it's directed to the General Manager, and it's signed off by David Jones Building and Landscape Design with a telephone number there. That should correctly identify it. It's an email that lists 6 points to support a request for deferral of the this application as has been put by Mr. Bucket and Mr. Jones on his behalf. Now, there's someone else who want to ask a question? Sorry?
That was sent on Monday, sorry.
Monday?
Yeah.
Was sent yesterday. Oh, it says Monday, the 14th of March.
Yep.
Oh, today's the 17th. Sorry, everyone.
Yeah.
Oh, that was sent on Monday. What did I say?
The 15th, I think you said.
I'm very sorry about that.
That's fine.
Make sure the record corrects what the document was, please, Jody.
Already mucked up the dates once today.
Madam Chair, I have a question of Mr. Jones.
Yes.
Mr. Jones, what makes you think you have a right to make a submission on a council report other than at the planning panel meeting today, As I've been around for a while, and I'm not aware that as a right, applicants have a chance to comment on a council office report in writing, in detail, before the meeting. They might send something in, but what makes you think we should go for a deferral because you have a right to make a submission?
Well, it wasn't going to be a written submission. That was going to be included in our verbal submission. But I guess my point was that this is a pretty lengthy report, and there's a couple of, as I said, some anomalies and confusing sort of assertions in this report.
No, excuse me, Rep. I'm asking you, what makes you think you've got a right?
Well, I do have the right to address the panel.
Pardon?
I have the right to address the panel as the applicant.
Yes, so it's through it's you're saying your right is through the ability to address the panel.
Yes.
Thank you. Have you got any qualifications?
No formal qualifications other than 40 years of experience in.
Yes, experience is okay. What you've got experience as a building designer.
Correct. Yeah, and consultant.
I asked not the applicant, the owner, Mr. Bucket, earlier, whether this present DA was submitted to bring the what was approved and what was actually built into line. Would you agree with that characterisation of what
exactly? Yes, that was exactly the point of the application.
All right. So, what's your understanding? Should this application be judged on the planning controls that were in effect at the time of the approval? Then, of the approval in of 1308/01 in 2003, Mr. Bucket said.
Well, I think he's got a continuing use as a tourist facility.
No, I'm not talking about this. I'm saying my question is, as an experienced building designer, is it your understanding that this application, the current one, be judged on the controls that were in force in 2003?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think the current buildings should be brought to the present standards required by BCA, the engineers, the bushfire controls. For instance, there's been a change to the Biodiversity Act, so that.
No, that's not my question. Do you want me to repeat it, or do you want to say?
No. Well, I think in answer, the use should be we should rely on the existing use, which goes back to the pre-12,000 LEP, but for practical purposes, the buildings should comply with the current requirements.
All right, very much.
And was there anyone else who wanted to ask a question? I think I saw.
I
think Mr. Stapleton jumped in. Yes, thank you, Mr. Brunton. You have had a go, but haven't. If there's anything further you want to ask?
I wanted to explain for Mr. Jones the reasons for my questions about the sequence of events, because that 2006 date, which is in the council officer's report, comes from the solicitor's report presented by with the application. So it says that the development started in 2006. Mr. Bucket explained to us that this development didn't start in 2006. It was the house that was approved by another DA that was built in 2006. So Mr. Bucket clarified that point. But the point didn't come from the council officers. It actually came from the legal opinion submitted with the application. And it's been clarified now.
Okay, good.
Okay, well, was there any question of Mr. Jones?
No more of me, thanks.
Okay, in respect to this matter, I don't know if Mr. Johnston wants to say anything at all. Mr. Johnston, do you want to say anything? You don't have to.
I mean, I'm happy to respond to any inquiries. I think ultimately some of the questions raised about the timing for things that that can be discussed during the closed session.
Yes.
As Mr. Brunton mentioned, that 2006 date was referred, that came from the applicant's legal opinion, so paragraph 33.
Okay. And you appreciate the primary position of the applicant in this matter is for a deferral.
But personally, I don't have an issue with that. Again, that might be a matter for the closed session in case there's any other views from council staff. I don't have an issue. Like, you know, council would like to progress this matter. My concern would be that, you know, we do have a legal opinion. Council has obtained that. And I'm just wondering if there would be benefit for the deferral if we're still going to be in this position again. So there has been changes in the legislation so that now council can consider an ecotourist facility.
Yes.
And that whilst there are clauses in the LEP that would have to be addressed in relation to the requirements for ecotourism facilities, that's an option that's available to them. So
yes,
look, overall, as a part of that assessment, there are not major issues with the works that have been undertaken, in particular in relation to bushfire and building matters as well. There have been building certificates applied for, and so there may be some minor upgrading required. But you know, I think that there's a way forward. We understand the applicant that, you know, hasn't had a lot of time, and you know, Mr. Rogers has maybe raised some questions about that. That's fine. I'll leave that to the panel. But look, I think that there is a way forward.
Would you agree that there's a level of complexity in the matter, given you had changes in the LEP and there's the legal issue?
It's a complex, like there's, with the panel, I can maybe provide a bit of advice in regards to the history, because a couple of things that I'm not quite sure that that's all correct. But yeah, look, there's some further discussions that we can have, and yeah, in anything that the panel needs, I can try to provide that clarification.
Madam Chair, I have a question of Mr. Johnson.
Yes, I may cut you off. So, because there is a significant legal issue in this matter, and we have a conflict.
Feel free to cut me off if you think that's needed. Both Mr. Jones and Mr. Barkett characterised the need for this day was to bring the existing what had been built into line with what had been approved. Do you agree that that's what it's all about?
Well, I'm not going to give. Oh, you're talking to Mr. Johnson. Sorry. Yes.
Yes, I am.
Pardon me.
Yeah, so this application has been submitted to formalise 2 cabins that have been built. I would read it that it's about formalising the use of those cabins. I don't really take, so there was an approval for 6 cabins, so that the original tourist facility approval was for 6 cabins. As sort of detailed in my report, it's the way the documentation has been put together that this is for 2 additional cabins. That's how I've interpreted it. So there's some other cabins that were in similar locations to what was originally approved. So there's a modification application to formalise those two. And so I don't know the names just right off the top of my head. Maybe proposed cabins existing cabins 2 and 5. So that modification application has been to modify them.
Both the applicant and the owner says this DA is about bringing what's been built and what was approved into line.
I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's not necessarily an issue either in my mind. Like, essentially this application has been submitted to formalise and to approve the use and ongoing operation of these 2 buildings, the treehouse and the Enchanted Cave cabins.
Well, nothing I've read relates to the use. Council's paper says location and design.
Well, the proposal details, and I'm assuming it's repeated from the actual development application. This is at page 63, calls it tourist facility - use of 2 buildings as tourist facilities. Am I right, Mr. Johnson, that where that's put in a report comes straight off the development application? Page 63.
So on the application form, it says use of 2 cabins as part of an existing tourist facility. That's what was included in the application form.
Okay. Sorry, Mr. Stapleton, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Thank you. This isn't a modification DA, is it? It's a new DA?
That's correct. It's a new development application.
If it was to bring in, was to regularise what's been built and what was approved, could you do either a DA or a DA modification?
So this application has, this development has quite a history. So there has been a section 4.55 application submitted. So in terms of...
Sorry, I'll ask it a different way. Is this DA a modification DA?
No.
It's a new DA?
Yes.
Okay. As it is about 2 buildings that have been built not in accordance with the previous DA, what planning rules apply? Do the planning rules that were in existence when in 2003 when the 2 cabins were approved, do those conditions apply, or do the current conditions apply?
I guess that's a pretty difficult question. I think it relates to what issue is applicable. So, I mean, for example, for this application, current bushfire requirements have been applied. So that's what the RFS have insisted upon.
The plans submitted show what's been built and what is now being proposed for those 2 cabins?
So my view is that these are not existing, like these 2 cabins that we're dealing with as a part of this application, so the treehouse and the Enchanted Cave, these are not previously approved cabins. That's my view.
You said that before. You think this is about 2 new cabins, and yet the owner agreed with me. It was about bringing what was built and what was approved into line.
Sure. I get, council has assessed this application on the basis that there have been 2 cabins built, and this application was seeking to formalise their future use, to formalise structures.
You just said they were for 2 new cabins.
Perhaps this is getting a bit too long-winded. If you're going to refer to plans and things, I prefer we reference them in the papers so that everyone's on the same page in terms of what's being asked.
One last question, Chair. I'm
Yes.
sorry I'm taking up so much time, but surely it's clear on the drawings submitted whether they're modifications of what's being built or whether they're new cabins. Surely, if there were new cabins, there would be, what are the numbers? Were there 6 originally?
6 originally, and that one of them was a combined cabin.
Right. Well, surely now, if you're right, surely on the plans there'd be 8 cabins.
That's right. So that's what my report's referring to, about different ways of interpreting things, and that they've, I'm referring to, I think that potentially there could be 9.
And are there 9 shown on the plans?
On the plans, these things are shown, yes. So if you look at the site plan, that there are cabins that have numbers, but then the Enchanted Cave and Treehouse, they're not numbered. So my interpretation is that they're additional.
Have you made a site visit?
I have, yeah.
How many are there?
There are 5 from memory that are actually there. And then there's some other, there's a shed and another type of shed being constructed at the moment. So yeah, there's about 5 cabins. But there's debate about that because, there's a TP structure there, and, Lionel's had some discussion with other council officers as to whether or not that should be included or if that's something that's exempt. So it's a complicated application. I've assessed it as 2 additional ones.
Later in the closed session of the meeting. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stapleton. Thank you, Mr. Johnston. Was there any other further discussion on this matter? I think we need to move on to the last item, but I don't want to stop anyone from speaking who would like to speak or ask questions. No? Okay, then. We'll move on to we will consider that just for the purposes of the outsiders. We will consider that, consider what's been discussed in our closed session. I'm talking to you, Mr. Jones and Mr. Bucket. You can leave the meeting now if you wish, because your matter will not be discussed further in this meeting right now. Okay, is that understood?
Yes, thanks very much, Louise. Thank you.
Okay. Now we've got our last item has come to us because I believe the land is owned by council. And it is just find that one. I believe it's extension to a butcher's shop at Ebenezer, Wilberforce, sorry. It's at 15 King Road, Wilberforce, and it's DA 0303/21. It's a commercial premises, shop alterations and additions. The applicant seeks consent for alterations and additions to an existing shop at 15 King Road, Wilberforce. The proposal involves the construction of a 9.4 metre by 4.5 metre addition to an existing butcher's shop for the purpose of extending the butcher's work area. Just reading out from page 94 of our meeting papers today. The council, we don't appear to have any speakers for or against this proposal. The recommendation is that it be approved subject to conditions. There's some photos there in the papers. I have not visited this site because of difficulties last week getting through to Wilberforce. Is there anything that anyone, there's a pretty adequate description, there's a very thorough assessment of the matter. You might, particularly about Hawkesbury schedule of flood-related development controls 2020, as on page 97. Do we have the council officer who assessed this in the meeting?
Yes, my name's Nicholas Powers. I'm a town planner and I'm the author of the report, obviously.
Okay, is there anything further you want to add to your report, particularly since you wrote it? You can correct me if I'm wrong. We have had a major flood event in this area.
Yes, there was obviously a major flood event. It did not affect this site. Oh, sorry, not this site, this shop.
Yes.
Obviously, the site has multiple levels. So, yeah, this shop was not impacted by that flood. And I've got nothing more to add at the moment.
Okay. Now, I don't have any questions, but do any members, sorry, just before we go on to that, you have here quite a number of conditions that you've imposed as well. Does any members of the panel have any questions of Mr. Powers?
I do.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Stapleton, do you want to go first?
Mr. Powers, since the recent two floodings, which I acknowledge you say didn't affect this shop, or maybe the first one did, I don't know. Is there anything immediately being done at council that would affect the design of this shop had it been submitted this week?
Sorry, no, there would not be any changes to the assessment from my understanding. The schedule of flood-related development controls obviously requires the same assessment, the same requirements. I think they've addressed that regardless in their flood evacuation report. So that's my understanding.
But that's all, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. And who else put their hand up? Mr. Brunton? Mr. Brunton, your turn.
Nicholas, can I take you to page 95 of the business paper? And there's a photo down below at the bottom of the page. The right-hand photo shows the area where the extension's going to go.
Yes.
Now, my inspection of the site showed that from the public car park, that's not actually what you see, because there's a fence.
One would hope so.
There's a fence between the public car park and that area. Can you confirm that?
Yes, there is.
So what the public will be seeing is mostly a fence rather than a building.
Yes, yeah. It's not, obviously that photograph was taken with the owner's permission. I accessed that, sorry, not the owner, the shop owner's permission. I accessed the rear there. So yeah, the impact will be, visual impact will be minimal. Especially, particularly because the car parking is located within the front from a different angle. Obviously, there's a small portion of car park located just south of the shop, and they'll obviously see the fence and a portion of the building, the addition that is.
And similarly, between the fence will be a visual barrier between the proposed development and the childcare centre in the adjoining street. Adjoining street to the west.
Yes,
there's a childcare centre there. It's slightly lower, So it's looking up at the site, but the fence would probably shield it.
Yes, that is correct. The other, aspect is this building is in keeping with, sorry, did you say that you'd visited the site?
Yeah. Yep.
Yep. So I don't know if you noticed that the additions on the adjoining shop, this addition is actually keeping in line with the existing additions on the other shops located just north of it. So just adjoining it. So in terms of height and the area, it's in keeping with the existing shop arrangement at the moment. So it's more carrying on previous additions.
Anything further?
No, I'm finished.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Powers, two questions. Paul Rogers, Community Rep. Yes, I know the vicinity well, and I know the produce of the butcher shop well. Excellent. Is the tenant aware of, and did they actually request this extension of the facilities for their work purposes?
So the tenant is the butcher.
Yes.
Yeah, so this application has obviously historically been a consultation between the property department at council and the butcher's shop. So they have put forward this proposed addition because they have wanted that work area.
So the tenant, the butcher shop, wants the extension to do the work.
Yes.
Yes. Yep. Okay. In terms of dislocation of works during the period of works, they'd obviously be aware that there'd be a period of dislocation, and no doubt that will be accommodated between council and the tenant. So they're aware that disruption will occur.
They've been in consultation with the property department, so I can discuss that even further with the the shop owner even further. But from all the conversations I've had with them, they've made it clear that they understand that construction works are going to be happening and that they're prepared for it. Ultimately, it's the business the opportunity for a greater work area once the works are completed obviously will improve the functioning of the butcher's shop in the long term.
Mr. Powers, and Madam Chair, and for the board, I make this observation and comment because during both the fires and the floods, there's been just a huge amount of dislocation and pressure on small shop owners within the Hawkesbury. And any additional dislocation and disruption can have no doubt a dramatic financial consequence. So as long as they are aware and are consenting and seeking, I'm comfortable with the proposal. Certainly the people of the Hawkesbury have had enough, as we all have, I think. So thank you for that. No further questions.
Okay, so Mr. Powers, the applicant's name is Barry Munro. That's the butcher, is it?
Yes, Barry Munro is the owner of the butcher's shop. So
right.
It's operated, obviously, he's got his family operating and working with it, but yeah, he's the owner of the shop.
Okay, and I assume that all the other adjoining shops, shop owners or shop tenants, shop operators were notified of this DA?
Yeah, so notification was carried out. No submissions were received from it.
Yes.
So, yes.
Thank you for that. Okay, is there anything further want to say, anyone wants to say, or anyone wants to speak about this item in the agenda? No. Okay, so right now then we have got to the end of our open session. There was something that I had neglected to do, which was to table, because we're working remotely, these formal matters, table the conflict, sorry, pardon me. The conflicts of interest form signed by the members of the panel today. So I move that the conflict of interest returns prepared by myself, John Brunton, Ian Stapleton and Paul Rogers be tabled in the meeting. Can I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Mr. Brunton. And that, in my understanding, concludes our open session. Anything further, Jody, that we need to discuss right now or I need to mention?
No, but if you could all just remain in the meeting, I'm going to contact the IT department and stop the live stream so you can have your closed session commence. So
Yes.
I will give you the go ahead once it's stopped live streaming. So if you could just wait one moment.
When was that next meeting? 21st?
21st of April, yes.
Thank you. So we're online now, I believe. Council. Jody, we now online?
I'm just checking with IT, just one
Oh,
moment.
sorry. Okay, thank you.
Yes, you're live.
It's Louise Byrne here, Chair of the Hawkesbury Local Planning Panel meeting of today. I'd like to record the decisions of the planning panel on each of the items on the agenda today. Item 2, which was the proposed childcare centre at 6 Keeda Circuit, North Richmond. The decision is approved. Item 3, which is the ecotourism facilities at 88B Bulgamata Road, Barambing. That DA is deferred to the next planning meeting, currently scheduled for the 21st of April 2022. Item 4 was the extension to the butcher's shop in the Wilberforce Shopping Centre at 15 King Road, Wilberforce. That DA is approved. unless there's anything further, I would now close the meeting. Thank you, everyone, for your participation today.
Thank you,
Okay,
Madam Chair.
Jodie?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's excellent. Wonderful. I'll close the meeting now for everybody.
Thank you, everybody,
Madam
and
Chair.
really good to talk to you all. Thank you for
Fellow
your
members.
bye.
See you next